Okay, so I apologize for that. We're gonna have a little chat today, and in the first couple days we're trying to get organized, and people are getting things like their flash drives and whatever. So we deal a lot with the organizational stuff of the class. Photoshop and photography and stuff won't actually happen next week. It usually happens next week, but remember we all have a holiday on Monday, so we only have one day next week. That's Wednesday. So we'll spend one more day next week kind of dealing with the internet and how do you create an online presence and that sort of thing. And then we'll move into Photoshop and photography in that realm. So you actually have another full week before we get into that, but that's okay. It's just the way the spring schedule works out. Today we're going to talk about organizing your digital life and trying to get yourself organized at the start of a semester, get yourself ready. If you've been in my 136 class before, you've seen this lecture, so this is a little bit of a refresher, a little bit of a reminder. It's the one lecture that I double up on. So if you're in both classes, you're going to get it twice today. But I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of clarify and go over this stuff. So there's two real ways of organizing your files, and you probably fall into one camp or the other, or a hybrid of the two. The first is to have a flat file system, which is very much, I have one bucket that I put a bunch of stuff in, and I don't have any further organization. And it can be very challenging to find files. The typical way this is set up is you have your documents folder. Almost everybody uses their documents folder. Some people use their desktop instead. But it's kind of the same thing. You have one kind of overarching folder, and then maybe you separate it into some broad categories like, here's my Word files, here's my Excel files, right? And you dump absolutely everything into those folders. The problem with this is you end up with a lot of stuff in one folder. And my dad I always pick on him during this lecture because he's the perfect example of this. He has a file that has every Word document he's ever made in it. And it's probably like 1,000 files in there. And it's mixed up between, like he wrote a letter to somebody, and then it's like a lease that he has signed, and it's just complete disaster. And the problem with this is it's all in one folder, and it's hard to sort through, okay, what did I name that, and that sort of thing. It can be very challenging to deal with it. The advantage of it is that, well, I know I'm looking for a Word document, so it must be in this folder somewhere, so you're not going to lose it, which is good. But it can take you a long time to actually find the file. So it's not necessarily a bad way of doing it, but it may take you a little bit of time. Folders tend to be very large, and it can be difficult to find things. The opposite would be to set up a hierarchy. And if we had a hierarchical system, it would be you have your documents folder, right? And then you have some subcategories like personal or school or work or something like that. And then within those, you would further separate it down into subcategories. So for example, we might have a school folder. Inside of that, we'd have a folder for each of our classes. Inside of that, we'd have folders for these are the exercises I'm doing, these are the assignments that I'm doing. And it starts to get a little vague depending on what level of organization you want to have. Different people have different levels of organization, so you can further break it down. This is an example on my computer of kind of how I have stuff set up. Here's 135 lectures, right? Inside the lectures folder, you can see I have a whole list of lectures. Inside of one of those lectures folders, this happens to be today, I have a bunch of extra stuff relating to it. And that's about the level of organization I can handle. But at least it's broken down into some kind of a hierarchy. And generally, I know that all of the files relating to that one particular, let's call it a project, fall into that folder. Right? And this works really well in the field of architecture. You're in studio class, you're on a 220 project, you've got a bunch of disparate things that are going to relate to it. You might have some photos, you might have some Word docs, you might have some scans of your sketches, you might have an AutoCAD file, you might have an Illustrator file, and before you know it, you have all this stuff. And it's nice to have it in one place because then you know where it is and you know you're working on this one particular project. It tends to be pretty easy to find your files as long as you know what your project is and where it goes. The other advantage is on any of the normal computers, you can do a custom smart folder that searches for all your Word documents if you're kind of a holdover to that Word folder. So you can always get the other thing out of it. You can't do the opposite. So this can be really beneficial. Certainly when you get into the world of InDesign, it's helpful to keep this kind of structure organized because InDesign uses referenced files. So if you're pulling these referenced files, if you have some organization, you know where those files are. So if I were projecting this onto your flash drive, how you might want to organize things, you'd have the root of your flash drive. Next to that, you'd have a Dropbox folder. This is something that's coming today. We're going to talk about running Dropbox off your flash drive to back up your stuff. You'd have a Dropbox folder. Inside your Dropbox folder, you'd have your courses folders and your coursework. Inside of that, you'd have subfolders that kind of break it down into what you'd be doing. It's also helpful to have a folder that's outside of something that's backed up that might be just resources. Like I have V-Ray materials, or I have Photoshop brushes, or swatch panels, or something like that. And that just kind of lives there. Not precious items, but stuff, right? And part of that is if you had infinite space in the backup world, Dropbox is limited to 2 gigs until you start referring friends and doing that sort of thing. You're kind of limited in 2 gigs, so you want to protect what's important. When you move out of that realm, you could obviously, or if you pay for a bigger service, you could store your whole flash drive in a backup solution. Okay? So the other thing that's really important to consider is how are you going to name your files? And this is something that people run into trouble with very frequently. And that is that they just come up with some random name, whatever hits their fancy at that particular moment. And then a year later, 2 years later, you want to go back and add that image that you did in 220 to your portfolio. Do you remember what you called it? You know, what was it? It was some kind of an image. Boy, I don't remember. I better go back and look and find it, and it takes a long time. If you have a naming convention that works, that you're consistent with, you can save yourself a lot of time in the future. The problem with this is you have to commit to something now and then stick with it. So this is how I did it all through grad school, and I still do it for the most part now, though I'm out in the work world much more than I am in school, so it's a little bit outdated. What I do is I come up with a prefix that identifies the class specifically that I'm taking. And so let's say I'm in 121 with Daniel this semester, and I'm going to do some projects. It would be an architecture class, so I'd start it with A, right? If you're taking both architecture and art, maybe you have to do something different. But generally speaking, this is loose, right? Architecture, course number 121, and then I always added the first name of the professor who taught it, the first letter of the last name of the professor who taught it, as a way of kind of distinguishing this is what that particular class was. And the reason this is important doesn't matter so much right now for you guys because you're only going to take 135 once. You're only going to take 121 once, hopefully. But let's say you get into grad school, you're going to take what are called option studios, the 201 series. You're going to take the same class 3 or 4 times with different people. So that was a way of kind of combating that. So I have this as a prefix. Then I move on to a suffix. There's some stuff in the middle. We'll get to that. The suffix has to do with a addition and a version. The additions are numbered, 01, 02. You probably do this kind of anyway. And the versions are lettered. And the reason that I break it down into those two things is because an addition is a major revision. I'm working on an AutoCAD drawing. I decide to change my design. I talk to my instructor. They think I need to go in a different direction, and I want to move in that different direction. I don't want to completely abandon what I had before in case I want to go back to it. If you've ever been in studio, you should recognize this, right? You save what you have before, then you move forward. So that would be an addition change, big change, right? Then a version is just a sub change that happens. You know, I did a rendering. I don't quite like it. This is version A of the rendering. Then I move on. This is version B of the rendering. This is version C. It's a small change. Right? It's just a way of distinguishing big change, small change. So I add that to the end. Now what happens in the middle, I don't really care about. Okay, but you're going to have something. You know, this is a project, this is whatever. You can put that in there. All right? So if I were doing it combined, right, I have the course, right, followed by something, whatever you want it to be, followed by an addition, and then a version, and then whatever the extension is. So it's an AI file, it's a PSD file, or whatever. Okay? The other thing to be careful of in your file names is that if you put spaces in your names, it works fine on your computer, but if you go to upload that file, you'll get a bunch of random characters in it. So if you upload it to a website, if you have to be careful, some of the online backup stuff will do this to your files, some of it won't. Some of them work well, some of them don't. Dropbox will work fine with spaces, you can survive. But it will add like %, or something in the middle of your file name for every space, and it gets kind of chunky. So if you avoid it, you use dashes or underscores, then you don't have to worry about it. You also want to avoid any kind of special characters like slashes, periods, or question marks, because those are part of the coding language that works both on the websites and on your computer itself. And so you may have found that you saved some file at one point, and it was a dot JPEG dot something else, DWG, and then you couldn't open it because the computer didn't know that it was whatever type of file it was. So you just want to avoid the periods. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about backing up your files. How many people have ever had their computer crash? See? It happens to everybody, right? And I will share a story. I lecture on this every single semester, and I talk about backing up. And I've had some stuff happen along the way. I've had some small crashes and whatever. The last day of the semester, last year, right, in the fall, I got through class. We did our presentation. We did everything. Everything was good. I was getting prepped for next semester. I was in my office, and my hard drive on my laptop completely died. Like right in the middle, I was working on an InDesign file, gone, right? I'm fairly technologically savvy, pulled the hard drive, ran it through recovery and whatever. The thing was a brick. Like there was nothing I could do. I couldn't get a single thing off of it. Completely, utterly dead. Okay? So anything that I'd worked on, right, would have been lost on that day. So I had to go back to my most recent backup, which happened to be the night before, right? Because I do this kind of backup strategy, I only lost 1 day's worth of work. I was still pissed because I lost 1 day's worth of work, but the point being, if you don't back up your stuff, you could have lost the whole semester's worth of work, right? What if it happened right before your final project, right? Those kinds of things are what I'm talking about. So there's a rule of backup, and this is not my rule. It was something that came out from a group, multimedia guild of artists called the Pixel Corps, and they wrote up a paper on their strategy for backing things up. And it's called the 3-2-1 backup principle. So the first thing is 3. You want 3 copies of your files. Okay, you have a primary working copy, then you have 2 backup copies somewhere. Right? This is how you protect yourself. Don't worry, it'll make sense as we go along. It's not too hard to do this. Right? Then we get to 2. You want those copies on 2 different media devices. Right? You want it on a hard drive and you want it on a flash drive. You want it on a hard drive, you want it on a disk. Right? You want it in 2 different places. And that is because any media can fail. You say, well, wait a minute. If I burn it to a disk, it's pretty hard to make that fail. Well, okay, well, what happens if it burns up? Right? What happens if it gets scratched? Right? Those issues. If I put it on a flash drive, what happens when it goes through the wash? If it's your hard drive on your computer, what if I drop my hard drive? Right? My old laptop flew out my truck window one time. Like, stuff happens, right? Life is bad, right? Stuff happens. Stuff breaks. Right? I actually survived that really well. It didn't die. I was very happy. One, you're like, oh, why is this guy so careless? No, really, it was not a big deal. And then you want one that's off-site, right? And this is how you protect yourself if your house, and I'm not saying that your house is going to burn down, right? But this is how you protect yourself if that kind of a thing happens, right? If your house floods, if it burns down, if your car gets broken into and your laptop gets stolen, right? This is how you protect that, one off-site, right? So 3, 2, 1, okay? Pretty easy concept, but then how do I implement it? And specifically, how do I implement it in the lab environment here? Okay, so what do? You have one copy that's your working copy on your flash drive. Kind of obvious, right? That's the one you're working on. Okay, we're going to today install something called Dropbox Portable, right, which will run off the flash drive. Every once in a while it breaks, but the current version does actually work, so that's good. And what it will do is it will take a copy of your file and it will upload it to Dropbox. How many people have a Dropbox account? Right? It's amazing. When I first started doing this class, I would say, how many people have a Dropbox account? Everybody would be like, what are you talking about? Right? But now almost everybody has one, so it's great. Okay? We're going to upload one copy of your file to Dropbox, hopefully in a rather automated manner, so that it'll just happen. Okay? Then you're going to install Dropbox on your home computer or your laptop or wherever else you go. And so now if we reanalyze this, we have the working copy that's on our flash drive. We have one copy that's offsite in the cloud in a different media form, right? So we went flash drive, we went hard drive. So there's 2, right? We have 2 copies so far. Dropbox will automatically put a 3rd copy on my home computer. There's 3 copies, right? 2 different mediums. One is in the Dropbox cloud, so it's offsite. We just solved the problem, right? Really easy. So we're going to make sure to do that this semester. The other thing about backing up is that if it's not automatically happening in the background, it will not happen. Okay? If you say, oh, I'm going to make sure I copy my files every night off my flash drive onto my home computer, it's not going to happen. You're gonna get home and you're gonna be like, oh God, I don't want to deal with that. I want to watch Walking Dead, right? And so you'll sit down and you'll turn that on, or whatever. Okay, so the point being, if it doesn't automatically happen, it's not going to happen. So you have to make sure this is automated. It has to occur in the background. It just has to do it. And so what are our options to do that? The nice thing is that both in Windows 7 and Windows 8, and also on the Mac, there are automated backup solutions that are built into the computers now. Right? In the old days, when we had XP, it was a lot more challenging. Now life is fairly easy. Obviously, I'm a Mac person, so I understand the Mac side of things a little bit better. But you can have something that Mac calls Time Machine that just like deals with this stuff. Right? In the ideal world, whatever your backup is going to be wireless, so you don't physically have to sit your laptop down and plug in a hard drive. Though that is a pretty good solution. So ideally, you just have to be like working on your computer that does it. That's what we like. Okay. Now, there are some aftermarket solutions that are not branded by Microsoft or branded by Apple that you can use that tend to be helpful, maybe a little bit more custom as you go through certain strategies. The one that I actually use, I don't use Time Machine, even though I'm an Apple, we can call me a fanboy, I guess. The one that I use is something called ChronoSync. It does virtually the same thing, except that I have a lot more control over where certain stuff is stored. And I can deal with my backup on a more individual basis. Do back up these files, don't back up these files. SuperDuper is another disk image creator. This is great if your hard drive has died, because you can take one drive, copy it directly to another drive, swap the drives, and your computer still works as if nothing happened. It's also great if you're going to update your computer, to switch out hard drives or something. It's really easy to copy. Copian Backup is an incremental backup thing for PC. It's a lot like ChronoSync for the Mac. SyncBack is also for PC. And True Image is a lot like SuperDuper in that it creates an exact copy of your drive, so you could swap drives if you wanted to. Online backup, you're all obviously, because you raised your hand, familiar with Dropbox. There is also Google Drive, and there is also Microsoft OneDrive. Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive both, I think it used to be called SkyDrive. Anyway, both of those offer you more space. They work great if you're just working on your home computer, but if you try to sync them to a flash drive, they both do not work. I have not yet, as of yesterday, searching, found a way to make either of those sync options work. So they're a little bit pickier. You can use them just out of a browser, and I've actually had students who do this as their preferred method instead of working off a flash drive. They'll log into their Google Drive, they'll log into their OneDrive, they'll download the folder that they're going to work on today onto the desktop, work on their stuff, and then re-upload the folder to their OneDrive. It's a manual process. You have to make sure you do it, but certainly it would work. It gives you a little bit more space. Carbonite is another option that a lot of people pay for, and that just backs up your whole computer to the cloud all the time. But it's $50 a year, so it's a little pricey, right? Too pricey for me, so I don't do it. An interesting new player to this is something called OwnCloud. It's free, but you have to have a server that you own to be able to do it. So for example, I own, and we'll talk about websites and servers next class, but I own a server that's the Digital Tools server, so I can use that as a backup, the same thing as a Dropbox file, so to speak, but I have complete control over it. I can make it secure. Dropbox doesn't have any of my files. If you're security conscious, this is probably a pretty good option for you. And obviously there's a bunch of other. So your backups need to occur nightly, right? Even better if they occur by the minute, right? So you always have a backup. Certainly nightly. I told you my story about my laptop dying. That was a nightly backup, so I went back one day. I lost what I did during the day. It's not too bad, right? Backup weekly always helps to make sure you have a weekly backup, right? You can see where this is going. Backup monthly, right? Backup semesterly. This is a great time to get another media. You finished your semester, you burn it all to a disk, you put it on a flash drive, and you stick it somewhere, right? Then it's just out of sight, out of mind, but you have a complete backup of what you did that whole semester, right? Yearly is also great, right? So this is where you start to realize how paranoid I am about these things. So I'll tell you yet another story about me. You're learning more about me, right? So one of my more valuable possessions is my photographs. I do a lot of amateur photography stuff. I also have 2 kids, so I take a lot of pictures of them. And those things are quite precious to me, probably more important than most things that I own. Those being as precious as they are kind of my, if your house was gonna burn down, what would you grab first, right? I'd run over to my hard drive and grab my hard drive and carry it out, right? So everybody has their thing, right? So what do I do to ensure that I have a good backup? Sorry, I'm still recovering. My voice is still recovering. So what do I ensure? Every 6 months to a year or so, and this is something that I manually have to do, so it's not always on time, right? I make a backup to a special hard drive. It's not a special hard drive in terms of it's fancy or whatever, but it's a hard drive that I only use for this purpose. I back up all 57,000 photos, right? I make sure those are synced to that hard drive. Then I walk into my bank and I open my safety deposit box and I stick the hard drive in my safety deposit box, right? Because I don't think it's going to flood or burn down, right? It's a fairly secure location, I hope, right? And I'm not going to lose my photos. Now, unfortunately for the bank robbers that are going to come in and try to steal stuff, when they open up my safety deposit box, they're going to be thoroughly disappointed, right? There's no gold bars, there's just a little hard drive, right? But that's off-site peace of mind. I don't worry about those things because I know I have a copy, I know they're in a safe location. Now, do you have to be that ridiculous? No, of course not. But off-site peace of mind might mean you keep a copy of your important stuff at your friend's house, right? Or your girlfriend's house, or your boyfriend's house, or whatever. Well, maybe that's not a good idea. If you break up, he might kill it, or something, I don't know. But maybe your parents' house. How about that? They probably won't throw it out. Maybe. You keep it somewhere safe and make sure that you have that stuff for down the road, and that's something that's important. So we're going to shift gears momentarily. Hold on a second. And we're going to talk about more than just organizing your files, right? Which hopefully I've inspired you to do a little bit of that organization today. And we're going to talk a little bit about organizing your mind and your overall methodology and how you're going to approach the semester. And I know, it's early. It's hard to take this in. It's only like 8:30, right? 8:45. Come on now, right? I was up at 5 today. That's why I'm wide awake. I have to be awake that early to be able to teach you guys. Anyway, you guys are all like, oh, can I just go back to bed? It's all right, I get it. All right, that's what coffee's for. So this is a little bit about organizing your mind, getting yourself ready for a new semester. That's why I like to teach this in the beginning of the semester. I am not under the illusion that all of you will say, oh, I'm going to be organized and this is all going to work and I'm so happy, right? No, but maybe some of this will stick and you'll actually be excited about it and it'll help you a little bit, right? So it's worth at least talking about. So the idea is to forget forgetfulness, right? And it's talking about something called getting things done. Anybody heard of this or read the book? No, this is kind of the ongoing strategy. I talk about it and everybody says, nope, never heard of it. Anyway, this is something that was written out and I will explain it to you. Hopefully it will help clarify things a little bit. Anxiety is caused by a lack of control, organization, preparation, and action. How many people have ever felt anxious in their life before? Right. I have, definitely. Generally, this is pretty true, right? Usually, you have a lack of control, you're not organized, your life is in chaos, right? So how do we avoid that chaos? So there's this guy, David Allen, who wrote this book called Getting Things Done. And it kind of spawned this cult, so to speak, of people who try really hard to be organized and be productive in their life. And I will go through kind of his strategy. There are people who follow it to the letter and are very successful at doing it. I don't, right? I have kind of a hybrid approach, but I think a lot of the principles that he talks about help you to stay organized and be able to deal with your life. So there's a fundamental problem with stuff, right? And that is physical stuff. I drank the last of the milk carton. What do I do with it, right? It can be mental, like, oh, I'm going to bed and I have to remember that I have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this, right? It can be that kind of stuff, right? And the problem with all of this is it doesn't really have a place that it belongs, right? Obviously, an empty milk carton belongs in the garbage, but that doesn't help you remember that you have to have more milk once you get to the store, right? And you can't carry the milk carton around with you to remind you. So it's not quite there. The other problem is it pops up at the wrong time, right? So This is how David Allen defines stuff. It's anything that you've allowed into your psychological or physical world that doesn't belong where it is, but for which you haven't yet determined a desired outcome and the next action step. Right? So what does that mean? It means that you need to stop trying to remember not to forget something. Okay? So how many people go to bed and like are getting all snuggled in, and then they go, oh, I got to remember to do this. Right? Oh, in the morning, I have to remember to take my flash drive to that class because Grant's going to be really mad if I don't have my flash drive. Right? I better remember that. All right, I'll get out of bed. Let me go find the flash drive. Okay, I got the flash drive. I'm going to put it right on the doorknob, and I'm going to tape it there so I don't forget. How many people have done that? Right? I do that. Let me grab my laptop bag and stick it in front of the door, right? Because lo and behold, the next day you walk right out the door. It's taped right in front of you. You don't even see it, right? So the problem with this is that you have this stuff floating in your head and it pops up at the wrong time. When you go get in bed and you're all comfy, you don't want to be thinking about your flash drive. You want to be thinking about whatever you're thinking about going to bed, right? Dreaming or whatever, okay? So the problem is you need to get this stuff out of your head, right, into some kind of a system whenever it pops up so that you don't have to worry about it, right? If, for example, you came up with, I need to remember that flash drive, and you made a note of it somewhere, and every time before you walked out the door, you checked that note and said, what do I need, right? And you trusted that system, it would work. You wouldn't have to get up and put it in front of the door. You just put it into that system, right? So you need to be able to have this kind of a system that can handle the big, large-scale stuff and the small stuff, like don't forget your flash drive, right? So the problem is the open loop. Your brain is one of the coolest things out there, right? It can remember things. It is just really awesome. It's really powerful, right? The problem is it is not contextually aware. Or I guess I should say very rarely contextually aware. And that means that your brain says, I need to remember something. And what it does is it just goes on repeat. I need to remember to bring the flash drive tomorrow. Great, okay? 20 minutes later, I need to remember that flash drive, right? 20 minutes after that, oh boy, I need to remember that flash drive. And you're going through your life, right? You're taking a shower in the morning. Oh, I need to remember that flash drive, right? It keeps popping up, popping up, popping up, popping up. And hopefully, when it gets close to the event of leaving your house, it pops up and says, oh, don't forget the flash drive. The problem is it doesn't always work that way, right? The ideal brain would say, I need to remember that flash drive. Great. Forget all about it until I get walking out the door. I need to remember the flash drive, right? Same thing with groceries. I'm out of milk, right? When you walk into the store, do you remember the milk? No, right? Do you remember any of the stuff you were supposed to buy? No, but you bought all this great food from Whole Foods, right? But it's a disconnect, right? So this is the problem. You have this open loop, and you can waste a bunch of your brain power trying to remember that open loop and having it keep popping up. And heaven forbid you have more than one thing that's trying to pop up. Right? And they're all competing with each other. Oh, don't forget the flash drive. Don't forget the milk. Right? Oh, I need some beer for this weekend. Right? Remember, all those things keep popping up. Okay? So, how do we get rid of this? Right? We need to find a way to pull that into a system, pull that into a capture system that we can trust, right? That will get it out of our heads. Right? You can do this with a pen and paper. You can do this using an app on your phone. Depends on what kind of strategy you want to go for. But it's a way of getting it out of your head into a system that you can actually remember and use. Okay? So, the other thing that can help is you often get a lot of physical stuff, like paper. You need a place to put all of that stuff. You get mail, right? That needs to go somewhere until you can process it. So you need a physical inbox, right? This is a place that you actually go through and look at what's in it, right? If you just have a box and you stick all the stuff in it and you never look at it, this obviously doesn't work. So you need to regularly review it and decide what to do about it, right? It's where physical stuff goes, right? You need the digital inbox, which is the digital equivalent of a place where stuff goes, right? Could be a folder on your computer, could be an app on your phone, something like that this stuff goes into, right? And the idea behind this inbox strategy is that when you think of it, you just dump it in. You don't have to decide what to do about it or anything else. It's just, I got the syllabus for the class, it goes in here, and I can deal with it later, right? And that's what it is. When we process it, or when we review it, you need to start with the item on top. You need to process one of them at a time. And this is where it starts to get critical. You have to decide what the next action you are going to do relating to this is, right? And we'll talk about next action in a second, right? And then we also have to decide what context you're going to do it in, okay? If it's going to be a less than 2-minute thing, right? Quick reply by email, something like that, just do it and move on. Don't try to remember to do it or anything else. If you just do it, you'll be happier, right? So you just do it and move on, right? If it's more than 2 minutes, you decide these things, right? So actions and context, right? The next action and the context in which it will be completed. And this is kind of the critical thing that a lot of times these systems don't have. And I think this is what makes it effective and very useful, right? So the next action is the next physical thing you can do relating to whatever this item is, right? And it has to be something physical. It's not, oh, I need to think about something. No, it's like you actually have to do something. And by assigning it something physical, it gives it a place, right, and something you can physically do to move it forward, right? I got a reading, I'm in the materials and construction class, and I have to read the first chapter, okay? What's the next action step? Read the first chapter, right? And so that's physically something that I have to do, right? I'm in 220. I got my first handout that talks about what we're going to build. What's the next action step? I need to sketch some ideas, right? I'm sketching. It's a physical action step. That's what we're looking for, right? We don't want to think about. We want to do. Okay? The next thing is the context in which it can be done. And this is the part that I think next action is really easy. Context is often left off of a to-do list. And I think context helps because you can start to get yourself spread too thin, right? A good example of this is I'm only here 2 days a week. And there are things that I can only do here on campus, right? I can't prep for certain lectures because I need the software that's on these computers. So it doesn't do me any good to think about and worry about stuff that I can't do because I'm not on campus, right? So I can separate out a context to be, I have to be on campus in order to do these things. Therefore, the rest of the time, I'm not going to worry about it, right? And by separating that out, it really helps when your life gets busy and complicated. Okay? So there are, of course, date-specific actions, right? You're going to a doctor appointment. It occurs at a specific date and a specific time, right? That needs to go on a calendar. No surprise, right? Hopefully with a reminder set so that you don't forget about it, right? Okay, so then it comes down to you have time. What are you going to do? Okay, well, first thing you do is, where am I? I'm at DVC. Great. Where's my DVC list? What can I do at DVC? Right? Where am I? I'm at one of the rental properties. What's on my list to do? Right? It makes it really easy to always know what you can do. Therefore, you can always be productive. Right? Because you have that next action. What can I do? Okay? So it's really hard to commit to the system completely across your whole life and buy into it. Right? If this is something that sounds interesting, I'd read the book or listen to the audiobook because it's a great way it's a lot more detail than what I have, and it can really help your life. There was a time in my life where I completely was into full capture, and I did absolutely everything. I've since backed off of that a bit, right? And I use it in certain contexts really well, and in other contexts, like remembering the milk at the grocery store, I've decided that asking my wife to get the milk at the grocery store is a far better idea and strategy, and I just don't worry about it. So it doesn't have to be complete capture, right? It can be something that is a hybrid system. Okay? Reviewing is also really important, and that is that at the end of the day, you can go back and say, this is the stuff that I accomplished, this is the stuff that I can remove out of my system, this is the stuff that I can move on with, right? So you look over your system, you check off your accomplishments, you go through your inbox, is there anything else that I need to determine a next action in a context to deal with, right? Right? At the end of the week, it's always good to look over the system. How did I do this week? Am I doing approximately what I need to be doing? Am I about as far as I need to be with my 220 project? Right? Those kinds of big questions, right? Big projects checked off, right? When we get into the monthly and yearly, this is trajectory. Is my life going in the direction that I want to be doing? Am I taking the right classes, right? Am I going to be able to transfer on time? Those are big questions, right? Big goals. Can I check those off? Okay? So if I were interpreting this just as a student, and the time that I started this in my life was when I was in grad school, because I got to the point in grad school where I couldn't manage everything that I was doing. It was just too much. right? And I needed something, and that's when I started it. And I used it just for school. I didn't worry about anything else, and it was only after that I finished my master's and whatever that I started to use it outside. So what do you do as a student? You capture your assignments, right, into your inbox when I hand them to you, right? Don't just write in your planner, assignment due in 2 weeks, you put it on the date, because what happens there is you put it in there, and then you completely forget about it, and 2 days before you flip open your planner, you go, oh, I got to do it, right? That's not a good idea. It invites procrastination, right? What you do is you say, what is the next action that I can do to move this forward, right? If I need to complete a tutorial, if I need to complete some sketches, whatever it is, it's the next physical thing that I can do to move forward, right? That's great. It's my next action. I can move forward with that, right? Then I determine where can I do it, right? What context, and then I can move from there, okay? Before you go to bed at night, right? Think about what those open loops might be. Great projector today, right? See if we can get it to come back. I can take a break and drink some coffee, right? Yep, good. So you go through and you can do it early in the morning. It depends on if you're a morning or night person. By the way, you will all very soon in the world of architecture figure out whether you're a night person or a morning person, and there's a distinct difference between you, right? I happen to be a morning person. I always was. So the period of time from about 1 at night on was hopeless for me in grad school. I could never do anything. So I would always go to bed at like 1, right, and wake up at like 5, and then I'd be super productive from 5 on, right? And so it's just a matter of you have to figure out what your timing is going to be. So if you're a night person, you do the stuff at night. If you're a morning person, you do stuff in the morning, right? You want to make sure there's no open loops. This is why it is good to do it before you go to bed, because you can actually sleep well, because you try to get out everything out of your head, clear your mind, go to sleep, right? Wake up in the morning, you have it all in front of you, right? And so obviously you want to review, is there anything that I'm doing tomorrow that I need to make sure that I'm ready for? Scheduled items, right? If you have something that doesn't require an action to it, I gave you the syllabus last class, not a whole lot that you can do with the syllabus, right? You have a couple options. You could save it for reference somewhere, put it in a binder, right? You could toss it. This might not be a bad strategy, right? Or you can like let it percolate, think about it a little bit more, right? That last one's a little hard because then where do you put it, right? And there's a whole strategy for how you deal with something called a tickler file and whatever. It's too much, right? That's where I started to break down in the system. So I am not under the illusion that this is something that will work for each and every one of you. But I hope that thinking about next action, next physical thing I can do, and the context in which I can do it will help you move forward this semester, right? So you're always thinking that. If you want help doing it, there is a variety of software that can help you do it. If you're on a Mac, something called Things will do it. OmniFocus will also do it. That's the one I use. Clear Context is on the PC, and there's a bunch of other things that you can use as well. Ideally, whatever you're going to use crosses over to your phone, right? Syncs from your desktop to your phone. We're in this world where everything needs to be interconnected. That's how we want it. This is the OmniFocus one. This was a project that I was doing a while back, and you can see that it's a bunch of construction stuff, basically. But it helps keep that organized. The nice thing is it syncs to your phone. Obviously, this is an old phone, iPhone. But you get the idea, right? It syncs back and forth. It's easy to check stuff off. Right, there are web applications. You'll explore these a little bit in your exercise today. That will kind of help you through this. A couple quick screenshots to identify it. It looks a lot like a to-do list, the difference being that there is always going to be, there's your next action, there's always going to be project, there's your context, right? Context, next action on these things, right? We can move forward. Right. Another example here, right? They're just in different, in a different place, right? There's your next actions, right? There's your projects. There's your context. A little harder to find on this particular site, right? This one, I kind of like this one. Similar, right? You put your new tasks in there, right? You've got projects there. Projects are kind of like folders. Your context is there. They call it a focus. I don't know why I put a slide for shortcut menu, but whatever. So the last thing we'll talk about a little bit is calendar. How many people keep an accurate calendar? Right? kind of surprising because it would be important in the world of school to have a calendar, right? Ideally speaking, how many people have a smartphone right now? Right? It's amazing how, whatever, 5-6 years ago you could ask that question and most people are like, no, I still have a razor, right? So things have changed a little bit. You have a smartphone. Guess what? Your smartphone has a calendar on it. Maybe you should use it, right? So we're going to talk about calendars. In the context of calendars today, I will show you how to subscribe to the calendar for this class. It would be really nice if every one of your teachers did the same thing, right? So you could have your stuff in your system. The nice thing about that is if I change a due date, right, it automatically goes out to all of your calendars, right? So that kind of a thing is a really good system for a class like this, so you can be up to date on what's actually happening in class. There's a variety of calendars. The most common ones now are generally Google Calendar. Most people use that or sync that to their phones. You can use iCal if you have a Mac and an iPhone, right? That's one way. Outlook has a calendar that works nicely in the Windows world if you're doing that. And, of course, a lot of people have a Yahoo Calendar. Yeah?
If it's synced, will it notify us if you update a due date, or will it just update it on its own?
It'll update it on its own, but generally I set reminders, and those reminders should populate out to you. So I'll remind you a week before and, like a day before or something like that. And of course I'll tell you in class and I'll beat you over the head, but it's always a good reference. So this is Google Calendar. It looks virtually the same as it does. If we're looking at the actual days, you can see that I have, right, this is mine, so I have 2 classes worth. You guys will have just 1 class worth. You'll have the 135 lecture and a lab, and in conjunction with that, there'll be a separate line item if there's an assignment due or whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to stop this, and we're going to switch over.
Yeah, and that's what happens. A lot of times you come up with what works for you. And so
use a combination of my phone, iPad, calendar.
There are those of us that have already spent time figuring that stuff out, and there are people who have never even thought about it before. And so that was geared towards people who have never thought about it before.
I'm actually considering doing my flash drive and using it up in Spanish. I haven't tried that yet. So
I haven't tried that. I don't know. Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay, so we're going to get back started with exercise 202. And I'm going to spend the bulk of my time kind of walking through part 1, and then I'll probably do a little bit on part 2, though part 2, everybody seems to be able to do part 2 quite easily on their own. It's pretty easy. So the big thing is installing the Dropbox portable on your flash drive. And so we're going to kind of walk through that. Now, the Dropbox portable application is not something that's actually written by the Dropbox company. It's written by an independent person who thinks it's really important that we be able to back up our flash drives. And I've been using his software for quite a while. Occasionally, Dropbox, the company, changes something in their API that makes it so that they can't, the Dropbox portable breaks, basically. That happened last fall, the day before we were going to try to install this, so we had to skip that part of it. He has worked out a new version of his software that's a beta version that seems to work quite well in my tests of it, so we're going to try it. The good news is it's not going to do anything to your files, it just will not work if something goes wrong. So the idea is that it will work, though, so we're going to work through it. So I've gone ahead and I've opened up the Digital Life 0.3 tutorial. So I went to Tutorials, Digital Life, and then 0.3. And that's Dropbox Portable. And everything that I'll do is written out step by step here for how you do it. My guess is that most of you already have a Dropbox account. If you don't, you can click on this link and sign up, or you can go to Dropbox.com and sign up with your email. If you don't have a Dropbox account and you want to be really nice to a friend or something, have them give you a referral link because they can get a little bit more space out of it. But anyway, no big deal. The next thing is that this is the Dropbox Portable AHK software. He has his beta version of the software posted in this Google forum. So I've made a link to the Google forum so you can actually go straight there, which is what I will do. which shows, actually, if you look through it, all the 16,000 views of this forum. There's a lot of people who find this really important, and they all try to collaborate and work on it. So we're joining that community. What we want is the 1.6.8.4 beta. It's the one that's on the top. And if we click on that, it will take us to be able to download. There's a link to download it here, and that's what we're going to download. And I'll click on that, and it will then download onto my computer into my downloads folder. Okay, so it's important to recognize that it's not on my flash drive yet. Okay, so once that's done downloading onto the computer, I'm going to go ahead and show in folder, and since I'm in Chrome, I know it's down here in the corner, you guys can't see it very well, but since I'm in Chrome, there's a little triangle that I can click on, and then a menu item for show in folder. Basically, all that's doing is opening my downloads folder. You could just as easily go to the start menu and go to computer, and then click on downloads here, and it would take you to the same folder. Okay, so when it's downloaded, it downloads as a zip file, which is a compressed archive of stuff. This will not be the first time in this class that you download a zip file, so we need to get you very familiar with extracting them and using them. And so, since it's downloaded as a zip file, the first thing that I'm going to do is not just double click on the file. Windows, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that you can double click on a zip file and it will show you whatever's inside the zip file, but it's not actually extracting the zip file. A Mac, on the other hand, if you double click it, will just extract the zip file and show you the extracted file. Anyway, it's a different can of worms that we don't need to open. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the zip file instead, and there's a shortcut menu that goes to extract all, and that's what I want to do. Is I want to click on extract all, and it'll bring up this extract compressed zip folders window, and from there I can specify where I want to extract it. And so I'm going to go ahead and browse and go to my flash drive, which is right there as drive E, and I have a folder called portable apps in my flash drive that I'm going to put it in. Okay, you don't have to have that. It just kind of cleans up my flash drive, so I put it on portable apps, and I go ahead and say OK. And when I do that, and I click extract, it will extract the files for me onto my flash drive, and now I can start to work with these files. Okay, so let me go ahead and go to my flash drive now, and if I look at my flash drive, I've got some stuff that I've saved in here, but I have a portable apps folder, which I'll double click on. And then inside of that portable apps, I have a Dropbox portable AHK folder, which is what I'm going to double click on, which will then get me to the Dropbox portable ahk.exe file, which is the executable file that will actually do the installation for me. So I'm going to double click on that, and it will bring up, in a little bit of time, we have to be patient here, the installer for this portable application. So the installer looks like this. It's the Dropbox portable AHK setup, and we're going to walk through the options here. There's not a lot of options that need a bunch of changes. It's generally pretty straightforward, so it's mostly just clicking next. So I'll go ahead and click next for the first screen. Internet connection profiles, I can click next again. Now we get to the Dropbox folder location, and this is, by the way, all written out right here, so you can go back and look at the images and follow along. Oops, sorry, with what I'm doing. But what I want is I want it to go to a folder called Dropbox at the root of my flash drive, so I know what's being backed up. So right now it's a /Dropbox in this field. I'm just going to get rid of the period, and when I do that, it's going to be my flash drive and then a Dropbox folder. That's what's going to be backed up, which I think is nice and clean, and that's the way I want it. You could keep it inside another folder. It's just harder to find. So I'm going to stick with just the Dropbox. Now your drive might not say E, it might say I, it might say G, it might be a completely different letter. It doesn't make any difference, but it's just the drive letter /Dropbox. So I'll go ahead and click next. It's going to ask, do I have a previous Dropbox folder? Next. It's a flash drive. I don't. Right? I like to check the box for update automatically because I don't like to think about it, and so I just check for update automatically. We'll go ahead and move on. The add-ons, I don't do anything, right? The user applications, I do nothing, right? Now we get to this screen, which is the Dropbox application files. And what it will do is when I click on this download Dropbox files, it will go to the Dropbox company and download the actual Dropbox installation stuff. So it's the current version. So this takes a little bit of time. Good news is internet is fairly fast here at DVC, but it's a 68 megabyte download, so I have to be a little bit patient while it goes and gets that information. Below that, I have the ability to pick a color for my Dropbox portable application. Now, personally, I like to pick a different color from the standard color so that I know that this is, in fact, the portable application, not the regular Dropbox. The regular Dropbox icon is this kind of blue color, so I'm going to go ahead and pick like a red color so it's different. You can, of course, pick any color that you want. And we'll go ahead and let this finish downloading. This is the unfortunate problem when you do things live is you have to wait for some stuff to happen. So I'm going to let this go. It looks like a couple of you have questions, so we'll do those while I'm waiting. So it can take a little bit of time once it finishes downloading for it to actually recognize that it's finished downloading. And once that happens, you'll be able to click the next button. But you have to just be patient while it takes time. There we go. So it finished. It looked like it was going to crash for a while. It didn't. So I've picked the red as my icon, and then I'll go ahead and click next. And when I click next, I'm presented with the Start Dropbox Setup box. And when I click on that, it will load up. Yeah, it's going to give me a warning. We'll just say OK. Right? You can read the warning if you want. I've already read it. Now you can click OK. And it will bring up the actual, and it takes a little bit again, the actual Dropbox installation, which looks something like this, which is going to ask you for your account. And I have to type in my account, but in order to do that, I have to look at what my password is. So hold on a second. and then I'll go ahead and click on sign in, and it will say congratulations, I've finished. Now I've been having trouble all this morning when I try to finish this basic installation and I say open Dropbox folder, it'll say wait a minute, it's not in the right location. If I click choose another location, I can just dump it right onto the computer itself, and I just put it on the C drive. It doesn't matter because it's going on my flash drive anyway, and that's what Dropbox Portable is doing. But without clicking on that, I can't make it finish the installation. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and it will then finish the installation. Right? In which case I can go ahead and click on finish on the Dropbox Portable AHK. Now, it's going to bring up this, you've successfully set it up, would you like to restart your computer? Earlier today, in my first class, I made the mistake of saying yes, right? And I had to wait for an hour and a half while this computer decided to restart. So, don't click yes, click no, right? And then we can move on, okay? So I'm going to give it a little bit of time and see if it starts to run here, which it should. It's not an instantaneous thing. So in my little tray here, I do have the Dropbox Portable application, but in a second, it's going to actually load up Dropbox itself. So I just have to be a little bit patient while that happens, and then we'll talk through it. Okay, so now I actually have my Dropbox icon. It's right here, right? It's saying Dropbox is running, and it's downloading the file list for me. Which is exactly what I want. Okay, so this is running off my flash drive. If I want to eject my flash drive, frequently I'll have to actually stop Dropbox. So I'm going to click on the Dropbox icon, click on this little gear here, and say exit Dropbox. And then I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my flash drive. And I'm doing this so that you can see it as a fresh plug-in. So I'm safe to remove the hardware. I'll remove my flash drive. Okay, and this is a good way of testing to make sure it actually works. Okay, so once I'm done, I have my flash drive out. Now, every time I come into the lab, and this is something that's a caveat to this whole system, when I plug in my flash drive, Dropbox will not start automatically. The Windows has decided that you can't automatically start an application when you plug in a flash drive. Not really surprised, because if it was a virus or something, it would allow it to automatically start. So it's going to not let me do that. So what I have to do instead is when I look at my flash drive, I actually have to go and I have to open this Dropbox Portable AHK. Now, previously it started the installer. Now it will just start the regular Dropbox. And so what I like to do is I like to actually create a shortcut to this. And then I like to move that shortcut right to the root of my flash drive. And we'll just go right to there, and then I'll have the Dropbox Portable, if I can find it, there it is, and we'll just rename this to be Dropbox to make it easy to click on. Okay, that's optional, but I have that little shortcut called Dropbox. When I plug in my flash drive from now on, every time I'll double click on Dropbox, and when I do that, it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to start the Dropbox application, and then everything that I save inside the Dropbox folder will be automatically backed up to Dropbox, right? And that's what I would recommend you start doing, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to save things like your Rhino files inside your Dropbox folder. That being said, it's a good idea to have something for the other stuff. And so I'll go ahead while this is starting up and create what's called a resources folder on my flash drive. So let me go ahead and click on new folder. And I'm going to call the folder resources here. And then inside of resources, this is where I'm going to put stuff like V-Ray materials and what have you. Now, you guys are all aware from last class that there are a bunch of V-Ray materials that are on the course website. So if you go to the course website and you go to resources and we go to V-Ray materials library, you can browse through and see a bunch of these materials. Now, I thought it would be helpful for you to have a starter pack of materials that contain the most commonly used materials that have been vetted by me and will actually work. So what I did is under resources, there's another link for downloadable resource packages. And so I set up some downloadable resource packages such for both classes. You guys are going to be concerned with the 136 section, such that you can download this and extract it to your flash drive, and it is a bunch of materials altogether, right? Rather than having to find them individually. Certainly, over time, you will add your own materials to this, but for right now, we can download the bulk of them. So I'm going to start with the zip archive of the V-Ray materials. The intuitive thing to do would be to right-click on it and say Save Link As. The problem is this is a Dropbox link, so you actually have to click on the link, and it will take you to a Dropbox page where you can then click on the download link. So I'll click on download, and it's going to download the V-Ray materials. This is about a 200 megabyte zip file, so it's rather large. That's why I asked you for a 32 gigabyte zip flash drive, so you have plenty of space for this long term. So we'll go ahead and let this download. And once it's done, right, once again I'll click on that little triangle and say Show in Folder so I can see the zip file itself, which is right here, V-Ray Materials. I'm going to right click on it and say Extract All, and I'm going to place it into my flash drive inside that Resources folder. So let me go to Computer, then to my flash drive, and then to my Resources, and that's where I'm going to put this V-Ray Materials. So I'll go ahead and say Yes, extract it. And then extract. And this will probably take a little bit longer. Go ahead and say yes. So you can see that it's a bunch of files. Now I apologize, I've made these on a Mac, so sometimes you get these little underscore files. I'm just going to go ahead and do this for all. We'll go ahead and copy them. And we really hope it doesn't take 5 hours. Come on, Windows, let's go. So we'll let that start its extraction in the background, assuming that it's going to speed up a little bit. So now that I'm back working, I can confirm that yes, here's my my Dropbox is working. It's downloading files right now. It's syncing. It's right there in the corner. So Dropbox is working. That's great. I'm downloading my resource package here. It's going to end up being on my flash drive inside of my resources folder. There'll be a folder for V-Ray materials, and inside of that will be all of my V-Ray materials. It hasn't finished extracting yet, so they're not there yet. Okay, so that's happening in the background. There are a couple other things on the course website that you may find useful as well. You don't have to download these yet because we'll probably get to them a little bit later on in the class. The HDRI background images, there's a collection of those that you may need, but you don't need to do it yet. The materials are the only thing that's really important. And the last thing is what are called VisOpt files, which are V-Ray setting files. I've done some presets that will help you quickly load up, you know, I want a certain sun and I want a certain lighting condition and whatever. So again, those two are not really important yet, but I wanted to at least point out that they're there. The one that's important is the materials, so go ahead and try to get the materials today. The materials? The materials go just on your flash drive in a resources folder. Right, because you don't want to waste your Dropbox space backing up your materials. It's a repeatable thing. You can get the materials again. Okay, so the one last thing that I'll go over is for part 2 of this exercise 202, and that is installing a calendar on your system. And so what I'm going to do is go to Tutorials Digital Life 0.5, which is calendar feeds. And this will walk you through subscribing to our course calendar feed through either Outlook, if you have a Mac, for iCal, for Google Calendar if you want, or for Yahoo Calendar. So there's a variety of options. You'll scroll to whatever one is important. The key is that you're going to want the A136 link, which is this little bit longer link. The one thing that people had trouble with earlier today was that when they went to copy it, they wound up with an extra space at the end, at the beginning here. And it wouldn't actually load. So be very careful when you select it, just to select up to the H, and then you can copy that address. And then it's a matter of going to your particular calendar and subscribing to it. I would demonstrate it live. The problem is I created the calendar, so I can't really subscribe to my own calendar. So if you have trouble, we can do it, but there is a step-by-step for how you actually go through and add it in each one of these online calendars. So for part 2, I want you to add a calendar. And then for part 3, I'm just asking you to put together a to-do list. If you have your own system that you use, you can just show me your own system that you're actually trying to be organized. That's fine. If you want to play around with one of the ones that I suggest, you're welcome to try that. If you use your Notes app on your phone to do it, that's fine. I just want to verify that you have started thinking about a to-do list, if that makes sense. So you're going to show me your calendar. You're going to show me whatever it is that you're managing your to-dos in, and you're going to install Dropbox, and then you're free to go. So my guess is it will probably take you the next hour or so, and then you'll probably be able to get out of here a little bit early. Okay? Remember that there is not class next Monday. It's a holiday, so we won't see you. But next Wednesday, we're going to get into Rhino, and we'll start from then on. Basically, it'll be all Rhino stuff, and then ultimately V-Ray stuff as well. Okay? Are there any global questions? No? Okay, good.